G'day folks, Rod Moore here from More Art School and Learn to Paint TV. Welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. This week we're going to do a nice little coastal setting, which is down the Great Ocean Road near Aireys Inlet. So I used to live down that way a few years ago and spent quite a bit of time down the coast there. It's a beautiful part of the world. So this is a little view looking back at some cliffs with a little lighthouse up on top. It's a fairly easy painting for most beginners to do. And I think you'll enjoy this one. So let's get into it. So step one, of course, is our drawing. We always like to start off with our drawing. So I'll use my little flat brush and we'll use ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. And I'll just get a little bit of water into there just to loosen up that paint. Mix those two together. And that gives us a nice dark mauve that we can then use for our drawing. And now the key with doing this drawing is just make sure you've got plenty of water in there just to keep that paint loose. We don't want thick paint for our drawing. And the goal with our drawing, of course, is just big shapes. Let's identify what are the big shapes and get those mapped in, and then we can move on to the next part of the project. So the big shapes in this one, there's really 3 or 4 main big shapes. There's the sky, there's the cliff faces, the water body, and the sand. So if you think about it as being just 4 big shapes, this painting will become a lot easier for you. Now I'm going to place the horizon line somewhere around about there. Okay, around about a third. Okay, it's not halfway, so that's an important sort of distinction for us. And out on the horizon we have got, there's this broken off piece of island there, and a little bit of a gap, and then we've got the main land mass. So I'll just bring that up to there. And then it's a series of different cliff faces. So there's another one there. And then we've got our main one, which comes to quite a bit higher. That one comes in around about there and comes down to there. And then that's going to come around there. So then as this works its way around, it gets higher and higher up to there. And then there's a series of outcrops that are catching the light, which is what makes it quite a good painting, because a lot of this is in shadow through here. So we'll just have to tidy up our horizon line there. So you can see this is one big shape here, sky's another big shape, the water, and then the wet sand area. Now I'm going to make just a few alterations just to simplify this painting down, and that's really a big key with when you're learning to paint, is how to simplify. So I'm just going to run our water in there, and we'll have a few sort of waves in here, not too big, and something like that. So then we'll have wet sand in this section in here, and then dry sand up here. So I've altered the composition just to make it a little easier. Okay, and we'll have some nice big shadows hitting onto the sand in there. Okay, so with step 2, I've now put up ultramarine blue, my alizarin crimson, which is going for a bit of a run down the page, and a bit of yellow ochre, and I'm going to use a big flat brush. So we're just going to block in these cliff faces here, and I'll take this red as a starting point, just so it doesn't run any further. I'll get a chunk of that blue, and I'm going to put in a little bit of this yellow ochre, nowhere near as much. If I put it there, just a little pinhead of it there to hopefully get us a slightly darker tone. So let's just test that. That looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to block it in. Okay, so we're going to cover this whole area with this one tone down to there. Now remember we've got 3 sections here. Okay, that's important for you to keep that in mind, these 3 sections. Plenty of paint. Notice I've got great big piles of paint here, and no water. And at this stage, there's no white in here either. Okay, you don't want any white getting into this part. We'll put it into the other sections there. Okay, so make sure you got a pleasing sort of shape. It comes up on an angle like that as it gets closer to us. So just make sure you get that right. Don't have a flat top on it, is I think important. Working up to that edge. I don't mind if I clip a little bit of that wet paint and it blurs the edge, because as it gets further and further away in the distance, the edges do blur, especially if you're old like me and your eyes get a bit fuzzy. Okay, so that's good. So now we've now got a logical sort of sequence there, and we'll highlight this with some warmer tone, but we've got a logical step back, and that's what I think is important to keep that in mind. Now we add more white to that and more blue to get our next logical step, okay, which should be not as big a jump. So I want to create most of our contrast in here. So it's not as big a jump, however it's still, and it's still set back. Let us go for our sandy tone. I'm going to paint the wet and the dry sand as the same sort of value. So we'll take our yellow ochre, a bit of the alizarin crimson, not too much. We'll just get a little bit of that dark in there. Okay, a little bit more alizarin crimson. Now I'm going to paint that down here. Okay, our wet sand, I'm going to put that into here as well. Notice the angle that I'm painting this up. I'm painting it as it would run up the beach there. Okay, now as I get further away, I need to just lighten that off just a little bit. Okay, it's not going to be the same strength and the same value there. Okay, there it goes. Just moisten the canvas in that sky area. That'll help me just get the paint to flow just that little bit better. Now I don't want to use thin paint because I'm not going to come back and redo any of the sky. In here I'm going to work over that. But the sky, I'm just going to do one pass of the sky. So I want to make sure we get it right first time. So a big chunk of blue, big chunk of white. I'm not going to use any thin paint or water in the paint, which is why I just moisten the canvas a little. Okay. And let's just try that. Okay, that's a nice, very, very dark. Darker than what we would usually do. But let's just start off with that as a starting point. Okay. Now this brush is a little bit crusty, meaning that the hairs have dried with paint in them. So it's leaving a little bit of brush mark. I just have to work around that. Now, I'm going to lighten it off. Big chunk of white. Right into that mix there. Mix that around. Okay, so I've got a huge amount of paint there, but that's what I want. So now I'm just going to come in here, I'll paint another band of that lighter tone. Okay, so now I'm just going to come back up in here and start to connect this. Get those bands, paint there blended together. I'll leave the dark to last. Okay, so I'll just work in here until I'm happy. And all I'm doing is just blending the different colours together. Now I've got a fair bit of paint on my brush. Before I go up into that darkest section, I'm just going to pull some of it out, just so I don't lighten it off too much. And then what I'm going to do is just a little crisscross over that join. Just crisscross over there. Okay. Pull some paint out, and then I can start to again, I stress the fact that this is just purely the blocking part of the painting. So there's our ultramarine blue in there. Get some more white. Okay. So I think that'll make a nice sort of rich sky colour. That horizon line is not that far away from us in this particular painting, so it doesn't have to be lightened off at all, I don't think. Okay, now notice the angle that I'm working on there. Just get a touch of that yellow in there just to green it up a little, not too much, probably too much there. A little bit too much, not to worry. You can always paint that out. I'm just opening up the face of that. I've got plenty of blue in there. Opening up the face of that brush. Give us a bit of variety in the tone. And I think I just need to be a little bit darker. Just a little bit darker. A little bit more in here. So what I think we'll do is we'll start off with these back mountains here, and then we'll work back into the foreground. We'll get all that area detailed, and then we'll work on our water and our sand. So that makes the most sense. Got ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, same palette that we always use, and our titanium white, and I've just gone for a little flat brush here. So in the background here, these cliffs here, and here are mostly in sunlight, and that's pretty easy for us to create. So we'll just take some of the yellow ochre, a little bit of the alizarin crimson, and some titanium white, because it is off in the distance. Mix that together. Okay, a touch more red just to get it a little bit warmer. That's probably a little bit too warm, so a bit more yellow ochre and a fair bit more white in there, I suspect. Okay, that's looking a bit better. But of course, anytime we mix a colour, we will never really quite know if it's right until we test. So let's come down here, and I'll just run this down this one here, and just pop it in along the tops there. I don't want to fully block this in because there's a little bit of shadow that's going to peek through here and there. And there's some grasses and things that run over the top of this cliff face here. About there. That looks about right. I think it's the right tone. It works well with that shadow colour there. Just work that into this rock here, and again, leave plenty of that shadow coming through. There are cracks and things in the old rocks, so there will be plenty of shadow in there. Now, I just want to add just a pinhead more red and yellow into that mix, just to strengthen the value very slightly, because this one here has to come forward. Run that along the edge. That's a bit better. Okay, so we've got plenty of paint up there, and notice how I've got the brush loaded there. So let me just come in here and pick off a couple of these. So this one's going to run to about there, and then it goes back that way to there, and that runs over there. So. bits of light just creaking in through there. So, you know, it's just a matter of looking at the photo and determining where is that sunlight hitting in there. We've got this one that runs out to a sort of jagged edge there, a little bit up there. Another piece in there, which is a little bit lower, and then there's a little piece in there. This edge here, it's getting the sunlight. And a little piece in there. So just picking off where those little pieces of sunlight are going to be, and then we can come up to the top. Now I'll just go slightly lighter up the top, just to shift the temperature and so on. So up the top here we've got the sunlight hitting on these tops of these cliffs, but they're sort of rounded. So there's one there, and then there's another one there like that. And then there's another one that runs in there. There's one that runs in through there. Now the key to painting with sand is not to paint it in an orderly, neat fashion, but to make some big bold brush marks. And that's why I've got that shadow tone underneath to enable us to just pop in these big marks, but not get it perfect. And leave some of that underpaint to come through, which would just be, you know, effects of shadows and so on. Okay, so that brings us then to the wetter sand here, which just need a little bit more yellow ochre. So same process, so we'll get the sand colour first, yellow ochre and white. Slightly darker mix, and then we'll just a little tiny bit of the, see that little pinhead of the red into that, and we'll just send it into a slightly darker quite red enough, so a bit more of the red in there. And it'll send it slightly burnt sienna sort of colour, which is a good way to indicate wet sand I've found. So I'll just paint that in. Again, I'm leaving some of the under paint to come through. It's got to be darker than the surface area that we've already painted if we want to create the effect of waves. So see that? That's quite a bit darker than what's already there. And you've got to get the shape right running down the beach. So just be mindful of that. Soften it out underneath. And then just run it away to sort of nothing down that end. Just by lightening off on the pressure. Okay, get a little bit more blue in there. And don't let it grow too big. We don't want these waves to be too big. Let's see. That's probably all we need. I don't think we want to overdo these, but what we can do here, okay, you don't want a pure white at this stage. It'll just be really for the very end highlights. So something like that, let's just test. So it looks pretty white when you put it up there. And I'm just rocking that brush back and forward. Try to imagine how that foam would be at the end of the water there. Okay, and then where I've got these shadows, just right along the top there. Pretty easy little painting. It's a great little seascape to do. Definitely one you want to have a go at, especially if you're a beginner and you're just starting out. But even for our intermediates, there's a few challenges there as well. And I think you'll enjoy this one if you love, like me, like painting seascapes. Definitely enjoy this one. So this is Aireys Inlet on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. And fun little painting. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Make sure you check out learntopaint.tv for all the other episodes of Learn to Paint TV. And I'll see you next time on Learn to Paint TV. Happy painting.